So it was third grade, and Miss Matson had taught us about recycling at school, and taught us about how we can change the environment through recycling. So I came home that night, and I was passionate about this issue of recycling. So I came home and talked to my mom about it and said, you know, we need to recycle and we can change the world through recycling. My mom, the yes and person that she is, said to me, okay, yes, you're passionate about this. So why don't you get your friends together tomorrow and talk about it, all right? And so the next day we met right under this tree. This is a tree at Farmington Elementary School, and it's got some roads and things now, but then it was on the playground. And we met right under this tree, and we talked about what can we do as third graders, what can we do as 8-year-olds to impact the environment. So at that time, it was all the rage to start clubs. If you weren't part of a club, you were nothing. And so we started an environmental club and decided we were going to make a difference, right? And so it was under this tree that I learned the power, the transformative power of yes and. This is an improv tool, actually. If you've ever been to an improv class, you might have played this game, the yes and game. It goes a bit like this. One person starts off with any sentence. I went to the store today. And the next person has to say yes, and I bought bananas. And the next person says yes, and I ate them all on the way home. And you go back and forth and just creating a narrative. So the yes is I am listening, suspending judgment. It's a pause. The and I will add to it and help move forward. So this, you might be wondering why I have a picture of Vaughn Recycling Center in Fayetteville. This environmental club took me here to another yes and place in my life. My mom had told us, you know, you're picking up these cans and you do realize people will give you money for cans. I said, really? I did not know this. I thought I was just picking up trash. And so every day after school, usually at least 3 days a week, me and my friends are in the environmental club that happened to all live in the same neighborhood as well, very conveniently, got on our bikes, we would pack snacks and water, and we'd go and pick up trash around our neighborhood. So we'd come home, and we asked, of course, all of our parents and friends to gather cans as well. And we'd take them, my mom would take us up to Vaughn Recycling Center, and we would make money from these cans. So then the question came, what do we do with the money, right? Well, another issue I was passionate about, and still am today, as you'll see, is adoption. And I would see the commercials on TV of kids that need adopted, and I would say, Mom, can't we do this? Like, can't we adopt a child? Well, with 4 kids at home and in school and working full-time jobs, that wasn't quite something she could do at the time. But she said it still became a yes and moment where she said, yes, you're passionate about adoption, and what can you do about it? What can you do about it right now? So our money that we made from the cans, we decided to sponsor a child on one of those commercials that we'd seen on TV. And so that's what our environmental club became, and it was my first social entrepreneurship venture at age 8. So Vaughn Recycling Center in Fayetteville became an important yes and place for me. And that brings me to my mom and how yes and brings life and innovation. When I was 11, my mom was diagnosed with a rare disease called fibrosing medius tinnitus. There was only 7 people in the world who had it. And when I was 11, they told me my mom had about 2 weeks to live. And as an 11-year-old, that was pretty big news. They had told her, go home, you know, you need to just get your affairs in order, and there's nothing we can do. But my mom, being the yes and person that she is, okay, said, yes, I have this disease, and what am I going to do about it? I'm going to keep living. So she would still run around our block at night, even when it made her face turn purple, and she'd say, I'm going to run this right out of me, just like she does when I have the flu now. She's like, you need to go running. And so she did this. And this is my mom. That yes and brought her to innovation, because when Vanderbilt University called her and said, hey, over that 2 weeks where we thought we were counting down, over that 2 weeks they called her and said, hey, we have an experimental surgery we'd like to do. Would you be willing? The odds are not great, but if you'll do it, you'll be the first person to have it, and it could save your life. So she went to Vanderbilt and had this operation done. She had a heat-activated titanium mesh stent put in at the main artery to her heart, and she lived. So this is my mom doing a rim-to-rim-to-rim trek of the Grand Canyon with other survivors of debilitating disease. This is called Project Athena. And my mom, with one lung that works 20% and one that works 80%, does things like this. She's run half marathons and always encourages me. I've hired her as a personal trainer before, and it was terrible. Terrible, I tell you. I quit very quickly. And so, her yes and brought life and innovation. After that, they were able to study her and learn a lot about this disease, and many people are alive with it today. Yes and brings life and innovation. That brings me to my teenage years. I was 19, and I'd been renting for quite a while and decided that I'd like to buy a house. I came to my parents and said, I'm 19, it is time, and I'd like to buy a house. And my parents, with their yes and attitude, they said, okay, yes, and what's your plan? And so there in our living room, we sat, and I told them my plan. They helped me work through it. They helped me see the failures of my plan and some of the successes. And at 19, I bought my first house. I still have that house as a rental, and we've used it actually to house homeless teens as well through another program. And so it's been a great success. But it was my parents' yes and that brought me to that. And brought me to my next yes and place, which was starting a business. At age 20 to 21, I was training in youth development facilities and decided it was time I needed to start my own business for a lot of reasons. And so I had told my fiance at the time, now my husband, I think I need to start a business. And it was his yes and. He said, yes, okay, neither of us know how to do that. Let's go to the library. So at about age 20, I went to the library and got what I'm sure is one of the best business books out there, Small Business for Dummies. And I read this book, and it taught me how to start my own business. And so the yes and helped me start my own business at age 20. And I did that for the next 5 years. Now, you've seen how yes and empowers people with fearlessness, but I don't want you to think that fearlessness leads to a lack of failure, because there is failure. During the recession, I had the idea that a lot of my friends were getting laid off. There was a lot of depression, and I decided that the thing that was going to fix it was an adult bounce party, okay? Like bounce houses, all of the candy we enjoyed when we were kids. I decided this was going to fix this issue. They were all going to decide that life is worth living and all the depression was going to go away. And so what we needed was an adult bounce party. So my husband, with his yes and attitude, said yes, and if you only use the money from your business. Yes, you can do it, though. So I said, okay. So I went on a path to sponsor this adult bounce party. Now, I thought everybody would catch on, and they'd catch the vision, and they would come, and it would turn their lives around. And I was wrong. About 12 people came, and they had a blast. As you can see, they got out some aggression, but I learned that just because you have a yes and fearlessness, failure is also part of that. Brings me to my family. Now, my children are where I learned a whole new realm of what yes and can do. I learned through my kids that saying yes is very important, and I learned that maybe I didn't say yes quite enough. So that brings me to my next question. These are my kids and my family, and they helped to take off some of my rough edges. And that brings me to a question I want to pose to you tonight and think about for the rest of our talk. Are you editing yourself and others too quickly? I found that while I thought my ideas were great, when my kids maybe brought one to me, I edited them a little too quickly. And so I just want you to think about that question as we go forward. Are you editing too quickly? Now, yes, and the next thing it brings is it builds relationships instead of walls. My daughter, who we have adopted, has something called reactive attachment disorder. She, when she was a baby, did not attach to any caring adult caregivers, so she has a hard time loving people and has a hard time knowing what that looks like and attaching to other people. So I learned the importance and power of yes and by parenting her. She, when she hears no, it's not just a no to that, it's rejection and abandonment all over again. It's every no she's ever heard in her whole life. And so no to her holds a lot more weight than it does with my bio kids that are healthily attached. And so I learned that yes and builds relationships, and with her, it built this bank of trust as I said yes, yes. She might say, can I have fruit snacks for dinner? And you want to be saying, oh, no. But instead, we'd say yes, and we're going to have chicken for dessert. You know, how can I turn that into a yes and? And so I learned through the adoption and foster care how to bring this yes and build relationships. And what this note is the first time, my daughter, now she can say I love you, but she couldn't. And this is the first time she ever told us that she loved us. She wrote it down on a piece of paper. She didn't make eye contact. She slipped it across the table and walked away as fast as she could. But it was a big moment because it was the first time she said, hey, I love you, I trust you. And it's because of those yeses. It's because of the bank that I built with her. Yes and builds relationships instead of walls. That brings me to the work I do now with teenagers at the Teen Action and Support Center. I see all of this, the innovation, the life, the creativity that yes and brings. As you can see, we've got a group of skateboarders here. This is one of my favorite pictures. This was on the news last year. They came to us, came and talked to one of my employees and said, we're skateboarders and we'd like to do something positive in the community. And it's because of his yes and that they said, okay, what can we do? So they started a chapter of Skate for Change locally, the first ever Skate for Change here in Northwest Arkansas. And you'll see in this picture, they're in front of a sign that says no skateboards or bicycles per city ordinance. But what they had been doing, and the reason why they put this picture on the news, is because these skateboarders had been cleaning up the downtown and been delivering supplies to the homeless all on their skateboards to change the perception of skateboarders in the community. And many of these kids are in college now. They're doing wonderful things in the community as skateboarders, right? And so the yes and is what brings life to these ideas. It's what brings every Saturday our teens go to nursing homes and they play beanbag baseball and bingo with seniors, and they build these relationships. It's what brings Shirley and Jose that are in this picture together to build paper airplanes, when you would never think a 93-year-old and a 16-year-old would be together doing that on a Saturday. So yes and builds relationships instead of walls. Now at TASC, the work that I do, the yes and is very important, and it's not just for ideas. We say yes and to teen parents. This is Erica. And when we met her, we were able to say, yes, you're a teen parent and you're going to be a great parent. And then she found out her son was born with special needs, and she had to go to the children's hospital quite often. And we said, yes, and you can do it, and you can still be a great parent to a kid with special needs. Now Erica is in college at UALR. She moved down there because it was closer to the children's hospital. She has to go there at least once a month. And she pays for her school, she has an apartment, and she takes care of her son. And it was the yes and that was able to show her that no, not everybody's waiting on you to mess up, which is what we hear from many teen parents. Not everybody's waiting on you to mess up. We believe that you can do it. And this is also what we say to our teens who are homeless. Okay? Yes, you are homeless, but that's not the rest of the story. Or yes, you came through the juvenile justice system, and that doesn't have to be your story. What's next? What are you passionate about? And so that brings me to my final story of the night. Every idea, I want to leave you with this, every idea deserves at least 1 minute of life. And I'm going to tell you why. So this week, I was down in our new center in Springdale discussing what we needed in the way of computers for our new center. We had some money to buy computers, and in my head, I thought, well, we'll get 2 big name, very powerful computers, and that's what we'll get. So we're talking about the functionality with some of our teens and what they need. We have artists, we have computer techs, we have robotics teams, so let's make sure that they have everything that they need when we buy these computers. And so one of the boys said, you know, well, if I buy that part and put this thing together with this thing, I can save you quite a bit of money. I can build the computer. And I said to him, okay, yes. And what would that look like? And so he started telling me more. This kid is 14. And I said, and he told me more. So I said, yes. And how much money would you need to do this? And he told me that. Okay, yes. And what would that look like? And so we continued to have this yes and conversation that brought life to now. This is a picture of what our computers are probably going to look like. And this is just an example. At our new center at Springdale, they will be custom built, custom made by teens. And I was even surprised by my own yes and. I was like, man, look at what that led to. And it would have been so easy to say, no, Mac makes those really well. We'll just, you know, let's just go on. They've been doing this a while. It would be very easy to say that, but instead, this teen who actually is going through one of the hardest times in his life right now, he now has a project to focus on. Okay, this isn't a teen who has all the money in the world and whatever, but he has talents that are amazing, and that yes and is going to bring some show computers to our center in Springdale. So be waiting, because they're going to be awesome. And we're going to get 4 for the price of what we would have gotten 2 for. And so every idea, even my bounce party idea, deserves at least 1 minute of life. And I want to leave you with this, back to the tree. My first memory of how yes and transformed my life. Yes and brings life. It brings innovation, creativity, fearlessness, relationship, and transformation. Thank you.